Welcome to Surviving Saturday, a podcast about holding on to hope in the midst of life's difficulties, disappointments, and dark seasons.
Times like that remind us of the agony and despair the followers of Jesus felt on the Saturday of Easter weekend, in between the Friday on which he was crucified and the Sunday on which he rose from the dead.
That Sunday forever changed the way that humans can relate to God. But what does it look like to be honest about the very real pain we experience in the in-between?
To fervently cling to hope in the God who promised us his peace and his presence, at times when he feels distant or even cruel.
I'm Wendy Osborne, a licensed counselor in Charlotte, North Carolina.
And I'm her husband, Chris, a marriage mediator, conflict resolution coach, and trauma-informed storywork coach.
Join us each episode for authentic conversations about how life not turning out as we'd expected has created the contextual soil for the growth of a tenacious hope in the resurrection and in a God who is still making all things new.
I think it was the same trip to Seattle, but I was sitting with two other friends doing some mirror work around stories my face holds. And one of the friends asked if while we were sitting in silence, I wanted to play music. And I'm a huge Swiftie. So I was like, let's play Taylor. So as they began to ask me questions that lead me to engage with my face and have a conversation with my face, one of the friends, Kathy, was like, we got to stop the music. Taylor is a maiden. And the whole world wants maidens to run the world, but they don't know how to do it. And this is a Crone moment. And so we stopped the music. I think it was a good call. It was very discordant.
Yep.
And so we sat largely in silence while another friend, Karen, was asking me questions to continue this dialogue with my face. And what began to happen is Karen's questions got overtaken by words from my great-grandmother. And I didn't see that coming. And this is a great-grandmother on my father's side that I had probably seen 8 to 10 times in my entire life. It was not somebody that I saw all the time. But with all of her wrinkles and her gray hair in a bun, she began to ask me so many questions and offer the most beautiful blessing to my face that I had been desperate for my entire life. And this was just this year. So it was right before I turned 54. So we're talking decades in the making of living with this face. And so I ended up writing a very long poem that is our conversation and realizing the loveliness and the beauty and the tenderness of the crone. And that while I am moving toward crone myself, I'm past mother, if we have maiden, mother, and crone for those archetypes of female development on a very general scale. I'm more in the place of the crone, but to me that had signaled old and outdated. And to have my great-grandmother speak this blessing, and to talk specifically to my face and to mother my face with a kindness that it was desperate for, changed everything for me. And I began to see the old woman as powerfully beautiful, as captivating.
That's captivating. I love that.
Yeah.
And I love that story. I would even say that as you're making your way to the old crone, I would say you are in the rite of intuition, which is the right before legacy. And it
take
is
us into that. Tell us about that one.
Well, you're right on the cusp of it. So you're right that you are not maiden or mother, right? You've created your children, you've moved past that, but now you're in a place of initiating those younger than you and moving towards the old crone. And so that's your intuition. And that's all housed in your gut. If we want to go to a physical place on your body, that's when you know what you know. That's whenever you feel something and you may not be in a safe enough place to say it, but you at least know it. Your body tells you. Now, the wise woman, she will usually put herself in a place where people will hear her voice. Like, she's wise enough to know, I've lived enough of my life. It's not about being beautiful, but it is about being wise. And me being able to use my voice, it's time. It's more than time. I have earned, right? What you have lived through, being the maiden, being the mother, you know things. Your intuition, you've been around the sun multiple times. You have a sense. And if you actually settle into your gut, you have a pretty clear sense. And that's where you lead from in intuition, in the rite of intuition. It's actually taking your place as the wise one. And then the old crone is the one saying, I'm leaving you because I'm going to something other. And so she's turning to the 50, 60, 70-year-olds. And she's saying, okay, wise ones, I'm going to go and live. If you need to come ask me some questions, you can. But you're the wise ones. Like, this is the baton. Lead them.
Yeah.
The intuition, she initiates those who are going through initiation. She is the one who oversees the younger ones who are saying, what do I do? I'm bleeding. What do I do? I'm in this relationship and I think it's not good for me. What do I do? I feel suffocated or smothered. And the wise, intuitive woman says, yes, this is what I know. After all these years, after what I've lived through, after what I've birthed, I can help lead you. I can help initiate you. That's the role I think you're in right now as you're turning towards the old crone. You're not there yet, right? Like, you're not in that space, but you're in a space of wisdom. And I write in that there's a lot of initiators. And some of us who are in the rite of intuition, we just want to, some of us will just focus on what we look like. We still try to fight for every moment of being visible.
Yeah.
And that's really leaving our younger women in the dust. That's leaving our maidens alone, right? They're not looking and saying, oh, that woman, I want to be like her. I want to go and study under her, because all we're trying to do is still compete with them.
Yes.
And if you're still competing with the maiden, you know you're not actually in the rite of intuition.
Yes.
It's not where your mind, heart, and body is actually supposed to be. And what you described Hayden doing by taking you kind of in this medicine walk is what an initiator does. And a woman in her intuition says, okay, I know what you need. Here, come and sit here, then go, then let me sing over you, then be on your way. Right? That's an initiator. She's not worried about what she looks like in that moment.
Right.
She's actually preparing the space for you. And that, I think we're at a loss for those. We have a lot of 50 to 70-year-old women who are trying to still compete with the maiden.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
We do. And it takes a very deliberate effort to not stay there.
Yes.
To be willing to become less visible than invisible, but to know that we know what we know and it is worth passing on.
Mm-hmm. And that means we have to face our grief, right? Because there's a lot of grief in no longer being the maiden.
Oh, yeah.
There's so much grief in that.
Right. There's a lot of grief in no longer being the maiden. Even though I loved Kathy's comment, we want maidens to rule the world, but maidens do not have what it takes to rule the world.
No, they will get annihilated.
What?
Mm-hmm. They will get annihilated.
Yes.
And that's on us, actually. That's on the intuitive woman. If she allows the maiden to run the world, then that maiden, the inside of her will decay.
Yeah.
she will have nothing. She was not made to run the world.
Right.
Sweet
Right.
baby. Like, that is just cruel.
Right. 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 So yeah, there's a lot of maturity that has to come forth from us. So, if I read or talked about books in order, this would make more sense. But I want to take us back to the Rite of Exile,
Yeah.
because the leaving, the being sent away, the saying goodbye. I want you to speak to that, because I feel that that is a necessary lead up to women who not only become wise, but women who speak. Because I think the path through the wilderness is a
Mhm.
necessary period of
Yeah.
time. A lot is
Yes.
happening there.
Yes. And so what we have not named is there's 6 rite of passages that I talk about. And it's birth, initiation, exile, creation, intuition, legacy. And it's over the lifespan, right? So first breath to last breath. If we go to exile, exile is actually what the maiden will go through, and it'll either take her out or not. So it is part of the maturation. It is necessary to go to the desert. And all of us have known what it's like to be betrayed, to be turned on, to be alone in a space where no one understands us,
Yes.
no one gets it. And going through the rite of exile, I would even say, are those desert moments where even God's voice feels silent. It's
Yes.
those moments where we can't find anyone but our own self. And we hear all the other voices, all the accusation, all the cursing, and we have to wrestle them down until we hear our own voice. And our own voice sees us clearly, and then she starts to whisper what she really believes. And then we realize that that silent desert is a gift, because we got to hear ourselves and we know who we are. And when you make it through the rite of exile, you know that you're invincible after that, which means death cannot fully kill you, right? It means that betrayal will not make your heart hardened. It
Yes.
means that you can still stay alive, in your spirit can stay alive. And that, to me, the rite of exile is my least favorite. And I do think it is where we were talking earlier. The women who are intuitive, the wise woman, she has to tell the maiden, you can make it through this. Because the maiden otherwise goes into exile and she doesn't know which way is up. She
Right.
doesn't know what the true good mother voice is. She doesn't know. Um,
I think that as maidens entering into the exile, we tend to feel we've done something wrong. We've gotten on the wrong
hmm,
path.
mhm,
That surely we're not supposed to be flung out here in the wilderness.
right. And maybe it's actually you need to speak your truth and your voice and your story from your body, and other people have more access to it than you do. And so actually exile is a gift to you,
Yes.
not because you're in trouble, but
Right.
because you've actually lost your way. And
Yes.
so we're going to put you in a space where you are only confronted with yourself. And
Yes.
in that confrontation, you see yourself and she takes your breath away. You're in
Yes.
awe of what you find in exile, actually.
So, as we start bringing it to a close here, I have a couple of questions. In story work, we're typically trying to help a person identify the themes of their life, particularly the experiences of pain, but also of glory, that have brought them to the conclusions they have about themselves, about others, and about God.
Yes.
And then our bodies hold all of that, and we begin to have a different relationship, like we said before, like mind, heart with body. And how do those interact? So I'm curious, when you think of the purpose of exile, where do you see God in that space. So I know we're learning to listen to the truest voice of the woman in this case, but I don't want to confuse that for the voice of God that can be hard to hear in exile. So where do you see God in this exile space, and how does it begin to help a person maybe hear God and see him more authentically?
Hmm. God is the one whispering through your story and your body the truth. And so let's take stretch marks, let's take wrinkles on our body. When you look at yourself, you either hear someone saying something about those lines on your body, or if you listen really deeply, you hear your hopefully your truest, most honest voice, which is what's actually happened, which is the Creator gave me this body. And then as I began to weep over these griefs in my life, I began to get these crow feet around my eyes. Or as I began to stretch and grow something in my belly, I began to get these stretch marks. Or when I was a teenager and I grew too quickly, or I grew quickly in my adolescence and I got stretch marks on my legs. It was really me growing up fast. And we actually have compassion on our story and our bodies and where they meet. And our voice is aligning with God's voice in that moment, because it's actually what the Creator says about us and about being made in His image. It's actually that moment where we are honest enough and agree, not with what society tells us or what lenses have been given to us, but it's that intimate moment. Going back to what you and I were talking about at the beginning, the lens of someone else is not there. It's my lens of myself and God's lens of me.
Yes.
And it's very intimate because no one else has to say. Only you know what you lived through and survived, and where you risked places to co-create with God,
Yes.
and what it cost you.
Yes. Yes.
And that's, I think, what we hear in those moments, in
Yes.
those really quiet places.
Yes. Thank you for clarifying that. I firmly believe, and I think we agree here, we can't present for healing what we do not name. So if we
Mm-hmm.
don't admit something is broken and in need of care and redemption, then we cannot seek that. And so um again, I'm human and I grieve and I have pain in my own life. And so a week ago, I took some time and let my pain begin to write a letter to me, and just tried to let the words come unfiltered. And I was pretty stunned at what it had to say to me. And
Mm-hmm.
partly, and I think this is why I asked the question about going into exile and how I have tended to blame myself for seasons of exile. It must be some mistake I made. And so my pain actually in this letter said to me, "You have not wanted me to join you on the journey because you thought that my presence outed you, that you had made a wrong turn. And you were more than happy to let anger join you. And in fact, you chased it down the road. You couldn't get with it fast enough. Um, but the pain and the grief, the vulnerability, the unguarded nature of that in the wilderness tends to be more than we can bear if God is not to show up at some point. And
Mm-hmm.
yet, part of being in the wilderness is where in the heck is He?
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that being out there, uncovered, undefended, are the places I have met Him most sweetly and most authentically.
Mm-hmm.
Far more than putting myself on the couch with a great devotional. Not that he can't meet me in that way, but it's in the places where I don't know where I am and I don't have a compass and I'm not sure I can hear him and I don't think anyone else understands. And those tend to be the dark tombs of the places where he dwells. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's oxymoronic, but
Mm-hmm.
I that is something that as an older woman I know in my bones that
Mm,
that is where he comes, even though every time I wonder.
mm, mm. I love that.
Hey guys, this is
Hi.
sometime co-host and producer today, Chris, just popping in for a second. I have thoroughly enjoyed listening to you guys' conversation, and I now want to mansplain it for everybody. The question I did have, though, as you all are talking about this, I found myself thinking about, wow, this is so powerful to hear, and just hearing the common themes in you guys' stories. And I'm not saying let's make it about the guys, but is there something can men benefit from this kind of thinking as well? Both thinking of the passages of life, but also I think there's some male writing and scholarship about that. But the idea of the somatic connection, the body connection, that feels like we men are way behind and not as at ease being in touch with our bodies and the somatic aspect of things. Can you guys speak to that, particularly you, Dr. Bauman, but when you weigh in as well?
Yeah, I would love to. I even love that you asked that question because when I write books, it's because my research is geared towards women
Right.
that it is. But the men who have read my books come back and say, Christy, I needed this. And I think for men, the one thing I see all the time is they are disembodied by nature.
Yes.
Where I am internal, where even my sexual reproductive organs are in my body, males are outside of their body. And so the disembodiment of the masculine is pretty normal. And so it's going to take more work for a man to have to come into himself. Whereas I am going to bleed every month, whether or not I want to.
Yes.
Right. And so it feels different what's being asked of our bodies. And yet, oh my gosh, the body tells us so much. And I think the one place that, I mean, there's many places, but the one place that I'm going to throw out there that might sound so crazy, but I think for men, I ask them a lot of times, men who sit in a session with me, if they were breastfed. And it's crazy because the mother wound is such a big deal for the masculine. But the first time we were all satiated, male and female, is either at the breast or at a bottle.
Oh, wow.
And so for a man in his own story of satiation or desire or longing or unmet needs, it to me starts in that first story of how were you satiated for the first time.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So I know that that's such a twist, it seems, but that's a question I ask men all the time because I think so much of their desire, I'm like, oh, it's in your body, but let's talk about it because it actually came from outside of your body.
That is fascinating. And yeah, I had the privilege recently of getting to hear your husband, Dr. Andrew Bauman, speak. And we hope, spoiler alert, he's going to join us on the podcast at a future date as well. But when he just floored the room of about 200 men when he said that same part about women by nature have been almost required, to be in tune with your body, to pay attention to the rhythms of it and what's happening. And at least it's sort of, there's a grace in that like you can't ignore your body's like, I am here, I need to be dealt with. Whereas we have been, it's external, number one, we can get by without paying attention to anything about our maleness. And then we've got the message of the church that comes in that basically, I mean, I grew up feeling like, damn, why did they give me this penis if it's going to be just trouble for everybody, is essentially. And it felt like trouble for me. That's the messaging of sort of purity culture. And definitely not like, oh, this is goodness and part of how I'm made. So I love even hearing how you're reframing such ordinary things to speak of the sacred and the divine. I think that's really compelling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do think it's very important for us to move toward the masculine body. Like it's so important, and again, not talked about. And having two boys and being married to my husband, there is a sense of where I want to understand what the masculine body has been through, how it's been trained, what it's been taught to do, because my desire is to tend to and care for the masculine bodies in my life that I've
Yes.
been entrusted with. And
Yeah.
so I want to understand that, but we don't take deep dives into that very often. Like we aren't thinking that way. And it's, again, I think satiation is such an interesting question of how have we been satiated, because I think it actually then comes out to what do we desire or long for. And
Yes, you have
it's
my
just
wheels turning now. I'm actually go and think about that a lot because I've been on a journey of a complex, just unraveling my connection with the feminine and where it's been good and where it's kind of worked. And you've added another layer to it that I'm gonna have to go and think about. So I'll dip out and let you guys wind out. But thank you for letting me pop back in, and love that you're normalizing just this kind of conversation. It's music to my ears, and hopefully men are listening to this episode even, and that we can learn to tend to our wives and their bodies better. But we
yes.
have to learn how to do it with ourselves at the same
Yeah.
time. I think it's that same thing with story work. You can love better your partner's story when you understand your own better. Probably the body
Yes.
works similarly at that.
Yes. Thank you, Chris.
All right. So, Christy, thank you so much for being here. I want to make sure everybody knows you're actually coming to Charlotte in January. You're going
Yes.
to be at my church at Warehouse 242. I cannot be there, and I'm really bummed. But tell us the time and give us a description of the event.
Yes. So actually, it's January 25th, a Saturday, and it's from 9 to 4. We're going to provide food. And actually, I wrote an album with this book so that people could
Okay.
experience it. And the woman who recorded the music is coming, and she's going to play live over everyone who's there so that
Fabulous.
we are going to help your body experience
Oh,
the teaching, not just hearing a lecture or a talk, but we actually want to help women be more in their bodies. And the day will look like an experience rather than a conference, so that you leave hopefully with some change, that you feel embodied in a different way than you did when you walked in.
fabulous. So, Saturday, January 25th at
Yes.
Warehouse 242, which is on Wilkinson Boulevard. Um, if you will send me information, Eventbrite, whatever you have, I would be happy to make sure that my clients have access to that to sign up. And if anybody wants to dialogue with you further, how could people get in touch with you?
Yes, my website is just christybauman.com. So you just put my name in there and you'll get a website that has my assistant and all my offerings that I offer.
Okay, and
So
Christy is a CH and a Y, and Bauman
yes,
is Bauman. So Christy
that's it.
Bauman. Just Google you and find you, and you are in Brevard, correct?
I'm in Brevard, North Carolina. Yep, and sometimes on the West Coast we have some space there. But yes, and this her rights workshop. If you are in Charlotte or nearby, what I love about it is it's going to be like one of the cheapest conferences, because with the ticket you not only get the food and the time and the music and the experience, but I send you an audiobook, and so you also get
Oh,
with the ticket.
oh,
So it
fabulous.
feels
That's
like,
generous of you.
yeah, if you want, so to speak, a book club experience in one day, you just
Yes.
come and you get all of it right there. And, I am a mother of 3 children. And so time is not something that is easy for me. But this book feels like a year's worth of therapy and
Ah,
one day for a very cheap price. And so that's my hope, is to get
fabulous.
it out and make it accessible to everyone who wants it.
Fabulous. Well, I wish I could be there. I will catch the next one.
Okay.
But it was such a delight to talk with you, and I will talk with you soon.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye, Christy.
Bye.
The Surviving Saturday podcast is brought to you by Nurture Counseling PLLC, a counseling, teaching, and training center based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. We help families flourish one story at a time. Nurture Counseling provides counseling intensive for couples, conflict resolution coaching, story work groups, seminars, workshops, and retreats to provide a safe and welcoming context for exploring the agonizing experiences of pain, brokenness, and evil that disrupt our lives, and that God often uses to nurture deeper trust and intimacy with Him and with each other. You can find us online at www.nurturecounseling.net.